That night, while the house remained quiet, I had no idea that something important was about to happen. Alejandro, my husband, had planned one of his usual business trips for the weekend. As always, he expected Diego, his son, to accompany him to help him with some minor chores. That time, however, something in me prompted me to ask Diego to stay. It was an impulsive decision, a simple comment that, at the time, didn't seem to have much significance. "Why don't you stay this weekend?" I said to Diego in a casual tone, just before Alejandro left. He looked at me, somewhat surprised, but finally agreed. Alejandro saw no problem with Diego staying home. Maybe he didn't imagine what was about to happen either. The next morning, I got up early as usual. The sun was barely peeking through the clouds, and fresh air was coming through the windows. There was something strange in the atmosphere, a calm that I couldn't quite identify. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, trying to keep up with my usual morning rhythm. Diego was sitting at the dining room table with his books open in front of him. Supposedly, he was finishing up backlogged homework, but it was obvious his mind was somewhere else. He was looking out the window, as if he was searching for something he didn't know how to find. I broke the silence as I poured hot water over the ground beans. "Diego, can you pass me that jar of sugar?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. He reacted immediately, reaching for the jar without a word. When our hands brushed as he passed me the container, I felt a spark of something I couldn't explain. It was a brief moment, but enough to make my heart skip a beat. Diego didn't seem to notice, but I kept thinking about it as I stirred the coffee. I sat across from him, watching him silently for a moment. His face had a mixture of concentration and distraction that was familiar to me, but at the same time different. Something about him had changed. Perhaps it was his posture, more confident than before, or the way his youthful features were beginning to define themselves. I decided it was time to speak. "Diego, since we're alone today, I think it's a good time to talk about a few things," I said, my tone calm but charged with intent. Diego looked up, clearly puzzled by my comment. "Talk about what things, Mariana?" he asked, frowning slightly. I gave him a small smile, trying to calm any uneasiness. "Nothing bad, don't worry," I answered. "I just feel that over time, things between us have changed a bit, and I think it's important to talk about that." He was silent, waiting for me to continue. I took a deep breath before continuing, choosing my words carefully. "Diego, you are not a child anymore. Every day you grow up more, and that brings changes not only for you, but also for those of us who are close to you." He looked at me with some confusion, clearly trying to understand what I meant. "What kind of changes?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. "It's hard to explain," I admitted, "but sometimes I feel like T here is a distance between us that wasn't there before, and I don't know if it's just my imagination or if you feel it too." Diego seemed to ponder my words. After a moment, he tried to soften the conversation with a nervous laugh. "Maybe you are imagining it, Mariana. I feel that everything is normal." "Normal, maybe, but sometimes normal changes too, even if we don't notice it right away." The conversation hung in the air, as if we were both searching for something we didn't know how to express. Finally, Diego broke the silence. "I am not sure what you mean, but I think you are right. Lately, I've been feeling something different. I don't know how to explain it." "It's normal to feel that way," I replied, trying to offer him some comfort. "Sometimes changes are hard to understand, even for adults. But I want you to know that you can talk to me about anything." He nodded slowly, though his expression remained thoughtful. I changed the subject to ease the tension, asking him about his classes and how he was doing with his friends. We talked about lighter things for a while, and although his laughter returned, the feeling that something had changed between us remained. The storm continued to rage, each gust of wind rattling the windows and filling the house with disturbing noises. Diego remained in the armchair by the fireplace, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. His expression was calm, but his fingers fiddled nervously with the edge of a blanket. Something in the air between us had changed since our conversation that afternoon, and though we didn't say it, we both felt it. "You know, I always liked it here in the storms," I said, breaking the silence. My voice echoed softly in the room, mingling with the crackling of the fire. Diego looked at me, nodding slowly. "Yes, there is something special about the storms here. It's as if the world stands still." His tone was serious, almost melancholy. I stared at him for a moment, remembering the little boy who used to jump with excitement when the first drops fell. Now, in front of me was someone different, quieter, reflective, almost unknown. "Do you remember when you were little and used to build forts with the sofa cushions on days like this?" I said, smiling. He laughed softly, his eyes filling with a nostalgic glow. "Of course I did. It always frustrated me when someone took everything apart before its time." "You had quite a strategy, huh?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. He smiled again, but the conversation paused, as if we both had something else on our minds. Several minutes passed in silence, until Diego, without taking his eyes off the flames, said, "Sometimes I think I miss those days. I didn't have to worry about anything. Everything was so simple." His confession took me by surprise, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. His sincerity seemed to come from a deep place, and I realized that this storm had unearthed more than memories. "We all miss the simplicity of childhood," I finally replied. "But growing up also means finding new paths, learning things we didn't know before. Although I understand that sometimes it can be overwhelming." He nodded slowly, but still with a distant expression, as if my answer didn't quite calm his feelings. "Mariana, have you ever felt trapped?" she asked, looking directly at me. There was something in his tone that made me pause, as if he was exposing a vulnerable part of himself. "Trapped?" I repeated, trying to buy time to think. Then I nodded. "Yes, I think we all feel that way at one time or another. As if we were in a place where everything seems right, but something is missing. It's normal, Diego." "Sometimes I wonder if I should be looking for something else," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "Something I don't know if it exists, but I feel I need." His words made me think. I remembered all the times I had felt the same, that vague dissatisfaction that accompanies you like a shadow. "It's good to question yourself, Diego," I told him. "That means you are growing, that you are looking for something bigger for yourself. Don't be afraid of not finding answers right away. The important thing is to keep moving forward, even if sometimes we don't know where the road will lead us." He seemed to relax a little at my words. His posture softened, and for a moment I thought I had succeeded in calming his thoughts. But then he spoke again. "There are days when I feel lost, as if I am in the middle of a maze with no way out. And although I try to act as if I have everything under control, the truth is that I don't know what to do." "Diego, no one has all the answers," I replied, leaning toward him. "The important thing is that you are not alone in this. I will always be here to listen to you." He looked up, and his gaze met mine. There was something in his eyes that reminded me how much he had changed since I met him, but also how much he was still the same curious, sensitive boy he had always been. "Thank you, Mariana," he finally said with a weak but sincere smile. "It means a lot to know that I can count on you." "You always can," I assured her, briefly touching her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to give her some comfort. The storm began to calm down outside, and inside the house the atmosphere became quieter. The fire was still crackling, and the sound of the rain had been reduced to a soft tapping against the windows. We were silent for a while longer, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence you share with someone when words are no longer necessary. That night, I felt that something had changed between us. Maybe it was simply the connection that comes when two people really open up without masks or pretense. Or maybe it was something deeper, something we didn't even fully understand. But what I did know was that tonight would mark a before and after in our relationship. And as I turned out the lights and prepared for bed, I thought about how strange it was how a storm could bring so much chaos, but also how it was that I could be so happy and so happy.